Good morning. It's a spring day. We are at the Bowl where we are celebrating the Quasquicentennial of our city's history. I'm Tony Momberger with the Redlands Daily Facts. I am here with Marsha Gebara. She is the program director for the Redlands Bowl, and the Bowl is celebrating its 90th anniversary.
That's correct. Yes.
No distinction of the Bowl. I want to say it's the longest running, has been for a long time.
Yes.
The longest running free arts program west of the Mississippi.
No, in the entire United States.
In the United States.
Yes, and I want you to know, Tony, that, and of course we always say without admission charged, but because we always tell the audience, remember, everyone needs to give so everyone can afford to come. That's one of the big concepts of the Bowl. We don't want someone, when our ushers pass the red bowl just prior to intermission, to say, well, it's free, so we won't put anything in, or I'll give them a favor and throw in $1, So it is free, of course, but we try to stress, remember, we can't have this miracle every summer in Redlands if everybody doesn't give according to what they can give.
About the founding of the Bowl and the idea that it's accessible to all.
That was Grace Stewart Mullen started the Redlands Bowl Summer Music Festival. She was very good friends with Artie Mason Carter, who was one of the founders of the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh.
And she wanted something similar here in her beloved Redlands, but of course a smaller venue than the Hollywood Bowl. But we are not a small venue. We can accommodate up to 6,000 people, including the grassy areas. So we are actually a very large performing arts venue. And from the very beginning, Tony, she started the Redlands Community Music Association in 1923, the end of 23 actually, and the first programs were presented in 1924. And the foundation of the Bowl has always been that it will be classically based with a variety of programming, and that no admission will ever be charged at a performance here during the Redlands Bowl Summer Music Festival. And I just want to add one quick thing, because I have gone to New York City a few times now for their presenters conference. And I have gotten up in a huge audience of presenters right on Avenue of the Americas in New York City. And I just gulped and I said, here it goes. I don't know if anyone's going to challenge me, because they've always said this, but we don't have it in writing anywhere.
Oh.
So, we have it in history books.
Sure.
But, they always said.
It. Right.
So I said, well, I'm Marsha Gebara, program director of the Redlands Bowl Summer Music Festival, the oldest continuously running summer music festival in the entire United States where no admission is charged. Nobody challenged me.
Then it's true.
This was several years ago. They said, how old are you? And at that point, I think we were like 86 or something. And all they said was just, wow, you're really old. But I didn't take it personally.
No.
So I do believe it's true.
In 90 years, how many program directors have we had?
We've had 3 volunteer program directors in 90 years.
3, and when you specify this as volunteers,
Yes.
but it's 3 total. There have only been 3 people in the 90 years.
There have only been 3. There was a gentleman by the name of Chuck Perlee who was paid, it's my understanding, during the late years of Grace Stewart Mullen to help her. But she still continued. She was amazing. She went till 90. And Florence Beeler, my predecessor, stepped down when she was 90. It's ironic that it's the 90th season, but I'm not going to go that long. But anyway, I've been doing it now for about 14 years.
For 14 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You still have a lot of seasons in you, I think.
I do. Yeah, I'm always looking, though, for those people, because, it's part of how we operate. If we have to start paying a program director, we do have paid staff at the RCMA, but we just slide into home base every summer. We just barely make it. So I really hope this will continue to be a volunteer position. And I'm also a Bowl associate, and I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about the history of the Bowl
Let's do it, because I think there's
Associates,
confusion between the Redlands Community
Yes.
Music Association and the Redlands Bowl Association.
There definitely is, and sometimes some individuals, businesses, corporations, companies give to both. And sometimes they give to one or the other. And we work very hard to make everybody understand, wherever you give, it's for a good cause. So I feel badly if anyone says, well, we already gave. Oh, well, you gave through the RCMA, but now the Bowl Associates are having something. So we try to coordinate together. The Bowl Associates were founded in 1950.
What's
by
their function?
Carolyn S. Pike. And their bylaws, our bylaws, because I am a bowl associate, states very clearly that the associates of the Redlands Bowl are to support the Redlands Community Music Association and all that they do.
Okay.
So
they're
of
like a
course,
booster group for you.
They are, and their biggest thing is fundraising. Of course, they're here at the information booths in the summer, and they have been going strong since 1950. I mean, they are just a miracle. They usually raise over 20% of our budget for us. So again, this volunteer effort is tremendous. We have over 1,000 volunteers every summer, counting the volunteer ushers who come from all kinds of groups throughout Redlands and beyond. And we have the hospitality ensemble, which prepares the food for the artists and also for receptions. And they were started in 2004 by Tracy Massimiano and Lori Gugasberg.
Oh,
Yes.
I know those names. I didn't know that.
They started the hospitality ensemble, which is part of the RCMA, but you know, they do all that. We have our red shirts, which was started by my beloved Jim in 1998 were the first red shirts. And with he being a retired Air Force officer, he knew all about this military stuff of getting a group of people together to be the heads.
And tell me what the red shirts do.
Yes, thank you. The
about
red shirts are the big coordinating group that coordinates all the volunteer ushers that come from the different organizations, as they say, not only here in Redlands, but from around the surrounding area. And we need 40 ushers every performance night to pass those bowls. So the red shirts are phenomenal. We have, I think, over 20 red shirts. And they take turns, you know, briefing the volunteers, because some of them never done it before. And of course, that's a huge part of our budget too, are the donations from the evening's performances. So that's what they do. We have an advisory committee, an RCMA advisory committee. And so there's all these people, and of course the RCMA Board of Directors that was started by Grace Stewart Mullen, and there's 21 on the RCMA board, all volunteers.
Yeah, let's name drop a minute. The executive director deserves some credit here. She's not
she's
part of this interview,
phenomenal.
but Beverly Knorr.
Beverly Knorr is our
needs to be
executive
mentioned.
director. She's a fabulous grant writer. She does so much. I don't know what we'd do without her. She raises a lot of money for the bowl in many ways, but particularly through grant writing and just being the beautiful, wonderful person she is. She really exudes the spirit of the bowl, you know.
I'm going to lead you away from this, but we will circle back because she got this Asian Arts grant that I would like to address later about this season. So.
And I just want to say, because I want to mention Christy Marnell, our office manager, and Jerry Graham, our communications coordinator. I want to get them in there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, because they're all mission driven, you know, even though they're paid staff, they understand the bowl and what it is.
So let's talk about the great transition. What is the bowl?
Okay.
What is the Summer Music Festival? What are we talking about?
Well, as we know, the Redlands Bowl is a facility. Now, the early days, there was no Priscillus. What is the Priscillus, people ask? That's a strange
You're great. You don't even
name.
need me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you won't find it in any dictionary. It was a coined word by the Whites, Florence and Clarence White, who were great philanthropists here in Redlands and very wealthy and great fans of Mrs. Mullen. And the story is they were walking out of church, and this was like in 1929, and they said, we're going to give a lot of money to create a permanent structure at what is known as the Redlands Bowl. Before that, it was a bandstand, a very large bandstand, which is now a house that sits over on Grant Street. Converted into a house, yes.
Really?
Yes, and it was called the Gregory Bandstand. And so from 1924 to 1930, the performances were not at this beautiful facility we have. They were in this bandstand.
And that was where the shrine is now, wasn't it?
You know, it was close, and you know, I have to look at my map to be told. It was here in Smiley Park, and it was again, you know, this was originally, I'll be grammatically correct here, a cacti garden.
Okay.
If you look at the early days when the Smiley brothers owned everything, they had all kinds of cacti around here. And then they got rid of the cacti and created the park. And there's, in the wonderful book by Gretchen Lonis, and other things. There's like even pictures of that garden. And anyway, they of course donated all this to the City of Redlands, as I said. And then I've got to share, because this is one of the most phenomenal stories about Grace Stewart Mullen's indomitable spirit and her, she was a woman before her time, And she went to the city people at what was then City Hall, and it was in 1924, and she said, we're going to have a summer music festival, and we're going to have an evening performance. You see, there were no lights here.
Oh.
There was a bandstand. I'd love to get in a time machine and go back to the early 1900s. It must have been just wonderful. They had those, bandstand, those performances of a band or something in the afternoon. But anyway, now we're going to have evening performances, professional evening performances, and a community sing. That was from the very beginning. So she goes down to the city and she says, okay, you need to put lights up there. And they said, okay, we will. Well, the story is it's 2 nights before the big first performance, which actually was a community sing. Mm-hmm. No lights. So the story is she went storming into City Hall and said, I am going to stage a sit-in. I'm going to sit all night. God knows what's going to happen to me. Oh. Because you're not putting the lights up. Well, I don't know how many criminals there were living in Redlands in 1924, but nonetheless, the thought of this highly respected woman sitting overnight down here, so that motivated everybody, and they got the lights up in time.
Very
So that's
nice.
one of the great stories about Grace Stewart Mullen.
Wow.
The early days. Yeah.
Okay, so the Summer Music and you've touched on it. The
Yes.
Summer Music Festival is a series. It's twice a week?
Twice a week,
for the whole
has been
summer?
since 1924. We've augmented it now to some Saturdays, but it's always been Tuesday and Friday evenings. And if you look at some of the old brochures, you see it. We've got the brochures from the very beginning.
Have you really?
Yes, in the Bowl office. Yeah, we have a lot of history. And and it was in 1927 that Hugo Kirchhofer, who was then the handsome man in the white jacket, we think, although I think we do have some photos of him. We assume he wore a white jacket. We know Wilbur Showalter did that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, he decided that the children should run on the stage and salute the flag.
Yeah.
So he started that in 1927, and we have never missed it any Tuesday since in the summer. We have the children run on the stage and salute the flag after the community sing and after the greeting of the people. But getting back to your original question, I got off track. In 1930, this beautiful facility was created, and Priscillis, loosely translated, means before the seats or before the people. It's kind of a coined Latin word. And the whites, I am told, were the ones that came up with the fabulous saying on the Priscillis, without vision a people perish. And you won't find that in every version of the Bible, but if you go to the King James Version to Proverbs, you will find that. That's where it comes from. And so here we were in 1930. There's a lot of history over at the library too, when Clarence White gave his famous address from the new facility about how this will be a beautiful place and it can be used for other things, as we know, high school graduations and all kinds of things, and other performance groups. But the RCMA has been here constantly since 1924.
And the season comprises ballet and classical music and opera. And a summer
from
musical?
The very beginning, and there's an interesting tidbit of history about the musical, because actually in Grace Stewart Mullen's time, she did do a few Broadway musicals. We have a history of Brigadoon being performed here, in the 50s, I think, or the early 60s. But it was in the early 70s when Florence Beeler took over as volunteer program director. She's the one who started the annual Broadway musical. And the first one, I'm like 99.9% certain, was Camelot.
Okay.
But we've had an annual Broadway musical since then. So that's the history on the musical. But also, if you think about it, Tony, I mean, there are beautiful performing arts forms that even had their beginnings here in in the United States that didn't even exist when Grace Stewart Mullen started the Bowl,
sure.
or were in
Broadway
their
musicals
infancy.
didn't start until the
Yeah.
mid-40s.
So I always think she's kind of looking down, and I always say, I hope you're proud of us, because we have changed it a little bit. I mean, we've expanded. We have jazz programs. We've always had world music and dance. She had that from the very beginning. She was big on dance companies and all of that. But we have stayed true to the mission in that the backbone of our season is always classical. And we, of course, charge no admission. So we have carried that flame that she ignited in 1924. And we mean to continue. It's just so important that that never change, because it just speaks volumes, not just about the Bowl, but about our community.
Yes.
And everyone is welcome.
You know where I stand on this. The
Yes.
vision that they had, that they couldn't have been without, or we would have perished,
Yes.
was, in my opinion, defining Redlands. I think that this vision that they had that was so good, incorporates us coming together and being with our neighbors and with the community saying, we sing together and we celebrate being a community, and it's accessible to all.
thing.
Everybody is welcome here.
That's right.
And it's the arts, it's education, it's culture,
yeah.
it's everything. And you're talking about top quality. You're talking about the jewels of the performing arts coming to the jewel of the Inland Empire.
Yes.
And the best of the best. And in my opinion, this is the vision that really has embodied and strengthened this community.
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah. Yeah, and again, really, if it weren't for Grace Stewart Mullen in the beginning, and she held on, her tenacity was fierce, you know. I know she put a lot of her own money into the festival in the early days. And I can talk forever. I do want to share this story.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, this is another beautiful story. And I was sitting here as a new Bowl associate in the 1980s when Jimmy Guthrie was still with us, and of course, famous conductor, you know, and had his roots in San Bernardino. And he loved Grace Stewart Mullen. They were very close. She was like his son. And he conducted many of the early symphonies. And he sat and told us a story. The Bowl Associates would meet here one meeting. And he said, this is absolutely true. It was in the 50s, and she found that day of the symphony concert that there was no money to pay the musicians. And she called Jimmy Guthrie in the morning, and she said, Jimmy, what should we do? Should I cancel the performance? And he said, no, Grace, I think you should take a step out in faith and have it. And I guess we'll tell the musicians after that we don't have the money yet. And of course, I always tell all the artists, never in the history of the RCMA have we not paid a performer, you know. So anyway, he said to us, this is true. I don't care. If anybody tells you any differently, I was there, I lived it. Grace and I were the only ones who knew there was no money to pay the musicians. She got a call in the early afternoon, I believe. I hope I'm getting the whole story exactly right, but again, I'm telling it secondhand here. But it was that day from Clarence White. And he said to her, Grace, you have been on my heart all day, and I believe you need some money for the festival, for the performance. And Jimmy Guthrie swears he knew nothing. And Grace just said, oh, Clarence, you know, because they were contemporaries, they were friends. He and Florence were good friends of hers. And she said, you have no idea. And he came over and he wrote her a check for like almost the exact amount that she needed to pay the musicians.
And that was coincidental? She didn't give him an amount?
That was coincidental. Wow. That's what Jimmy Guthrie said. I'm just telling, I'm
That's
just
a good
repeating
story.
the story.
Wow.
Because we lost him in the 90s, of course, and I felt so privileged to hear him speak. Of course, he was up there in years at that point, and Grace Stewart Mullen was gone. But he swears by that story, and that's where I always say there is a tangible spirituality at the Bowl.
Now,
tangible.
You're talking about the Redlands Bowl Symphony that used to exist, right?
Yes, there
Tell
was
me-
a Redlands Bowl Symphony.
This
yes,
is different. Tell me what's
yes.
going on here.
Well, we had a Redlands Bowl Symphony Orchestra until the 90s, the early 90s. And what happened was, of course, with the unions and everything, well, we're not a union venue. We're not really employers. We have a volunteer board of directors. We present approximately 20 programs each summer. That's what we do. And some of them are symphonies. Well, we ran into some issues with the union, frankly. And that was where we just said, we can't. We are not employers. So that, to make a long story less long, was the end of the Redlands Bowl Symphony Orchestra. And from then on, and Frank was all ready, because Frank Fetta, our conductor and artistic advisor, has been with us for many years now. And just to show you, he had already come on board at that point. And we just said, well, we can't, so then that's when we started working with the San Bernardino Symphony and the Redlands Symphony to have them come. But they are the employers, and we pay them a certain amount for the symphonies each summer.
Okay.
So that's the history of that.
And they often both perform, or usually both perform?
Oh, yes,
during the season?
they do, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Talk to me what you know about Florence.
Florence was a lovely person. She was a friend of mine. I feel I was privileged to know her. The Bowl Associates each year now give the Florence Beeler Award, which was created in the early 90s. She was with us until 2003.
Did she train you to take over?
She did, sort of. I was on the program committee, and then she did show me a lot of things. But in 2000, when she did nominate me in a board meeting as the program director, I knew a lot, but I still had a lot to learn. And she was still there. She just wasn't being as active anymore. And she went and spoke to the Associates of the Redlands Bowl in 2003 at their provisional luncheon, which is the first year of a 5-year commitment for the Associates of the Redlands Bowl. And then you can go limited, active, or sustaining, or honorary life. They have that category now too. But anyway, getting back to, she spoke beautifully. She was a wonderful public speaker. And she spoke at that luncheon, and the month after, in March, we lost her.
Wow.
And she was in a wheelchair at that point, which ironically, Stewart Mullen was in the wheelchair at the end too. And she would talk about it. She'd say, "Look at me, I used to wheel Grace, and now Marsha's wheeled me in to talk to you." That's a little bit of the history of the volunteer program directors there. And she had a gorgeous voice.
Oh, really?
She had a beautiful voice, and probably might have had a career in opera, but she married Raymond Beeler and came here from Pasadena, I believe, as a bride, in her early 20s. And they lived here ever after that. Yeah. So, anyway.
And then you started the Gebara era.
Yeah, yeah, sort of. Yeah, in 2000. And Florence had a great tragedy, actually, in the late 90s. She lost her husband and her son in the same year.
Oh, my gosh.
And I will never forget, because Frank was with us then, and he called me one day in the afternoon, and he said, "Marsha, Florence is so emotional. She can't go out on the stage tonight. You're going to have to go out." And I remember my heart just fell to my feet. I went, "Oh, in front of all those thousands of people, can I do that?" And I'm like, "Yes, you can. Yes, you can." And
Sure
I did.
you could.
I did. So then I would come on sometimes, but she came on stage until 2003. Not all the time, but her last summer music festival, of course, was 2002. And she would come on in a wheelchair, we'd wheel her on, and she would speak, and spoke beautifully. And she, are you ready for a couple of cute stories from the...
Yes.
Well, back in Grace's time, Grace was tough. I want you to know, she was tough. And supposedly this one opera singer came one night, and Grace didn't know what she was going to wear on the bowl stage, and she wore this plunging neckline. And the story is Grace went on and pulled her off.
Oh, you're kidding.
Now these are all just stories, but I'm sure it was true.
Oh, it's
knowing
Redlands
Grace, 'cause
legend
there
now.
were stories. I mean, Grace was. I mean, she had a dress code here. This was a concert atmosphere, and if you look at some of the wonderful photos, even in the 50s, can you imagine this heat? And you would see women dressed up, and the men had suits on, and it was a different era. And then of course we got more casual, but we still dress on the bowl stage. We think that's important,
Yeah.
and we are fierce about maintaining a concert atmosphere here. It can be a challenge because it's an open air amphitheater, but we want it to be a concert atmosphere.
Sure, I've seen you up there in an evening gown.
Oh
with
yeah,
the
opening night I always wear a long
diamonds
gown
on, and sure.
the whole 9 yards. Yep. And so anyway, that's a cute story. And Grace was always saying, "Children, get off the grass, get off the grass," because the children would come up, because we've always been a family venue. And then, of course, one of my favorite Florence stories, and I won't name any other names. I don't know who's with us. It might have, but the story was it was the opera Aida. And Frank was with us then, and he decided to have real animals on the bowl stage. Well, what do you think animals do?
Oh no.
And the story was someone said, "I'm not going to clean up that animal poop." And Florence said, "Well, I'll come down and clean it up." But I think somebody else did clean it up. But yeah, that's one of the cutest stories. She used to share that.
If she chose it and she
took
meant
ownership over she would go down and clean up that poop if she had to. And in her spirit, I want you to know, before we got our new public restroom facilities, I used to sometimes, I'd have a long dress on, I'd go over to the older public restroom facilities across the park, because at a point the city decided they would not allow paper towels in there. So women, particularly on the women's side, we always want to wash our hands, and the men do too. I don't mean to cast aspersions on the men. But anyway, we were like, shaking our hands. So there'd be water all over the floor, and we were terrified someone was going to slip and fall. And I remember telling the parks director at that time, "I'm just going to go over there and clean it up myself. If you can't give us, and bless his heart, he finally came around. But I can remember going over there, lifting my long dress up, and I bring my own paper towels and I get down and wipe off the water, because I was worried someone would trip, And then, of course, we had our crew that would help with that too. But I did it myself. I'm proud to tell you. I wear that as a badge of honor.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and I even cleaned all the bathrooms in the beginning when Mission Gables was a pretty wreck of a house. And I remember my husband Jim and I going through and cleaning those bathrooms for one of our first fundraising events.
Now, the Mission Gables you mentioned, is a relatively new story. When people look at this video in the future,
to the history of the bowl.
Let's talk about this. Is something that we just freshly have, and we're so excited and proud of this adaptive reuse project.
Yes, well said.
I don't know the story as well as you do, and I'm about to launch into it, which makes absolutely no sense. But nonetheless, this old building was dilapidated. It's falling apart. The Redlands Conservancy, as I understand it, stepped in and said, "You can't demolish this." And the RCMA. So you can't demolish this, and we have needs, and you could put an office in there. You could have an event center in there. You
Absolutely.
Can have bathrooms in
Restrooms,
there.
hello.
And over how many years? I understood Jeff. I want to make sure people get credit to Jeff Waldron.
Jeff Waldron
has just been
Wonderful
remarkable
Jeff.
leading this project.
He's our president now.
Take
as
it
we
away.
speak.
Talk to me.
Yes, well, I was one of, I'll tell you, 6 people that went tearing down to City Hall, and it was 1995, I'm quite sure, but I have to look back in the history books. We have the clipping from the newspaper article.
So almost 20 years ago.
Yes. And I still, as I say, now I'm more, used to going before city council and commissions and everything. But I will tell you, that was another shaking in my boots time, because I wasn't so used to it. But I remember I was one of the ones to speak, and I was just like, "Please don't tear it down. Please don't tear it down," because they were going to put a modern building there. And, this beautiful area, one of the jewels of our city, with the Lincoln Shrine and the Smiley Library. And I'll never forget then Mayor Sven Larson pointing his finger at me, because they sit up there, and I was like, "Please, please." I think I was the last person to speak, and he said, "All right." I remember him pointing his finger and saying, "We're not going to tear it down, but you're going to figure out something to do with that." because they had other houses that they sold. They had about 5, I think, rental properties at that time.
Wow.
So anyway, that was the beginning, and the Conservancy was just wonderful. They finally kind of bowed out and let us take it over, but I can remember our now treasurer, Robert Dawes, down here auctioning off, I mean, this was in the late 90s, auctioning off raffle tickets for a classic car that someone had donated to raise money for Mission Gables Bowl House. That's how long we've been working on this.
So how many years
Blood,
was it
sweat,
total?
and tears.
14 years, I want to say?
Yeah, at least. Well, our first, we had phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Our first phase was the public restroom facilities. That was the biggest thing. And those were completed in 2006. So that was phase 1. And I, for 3 years, had the nerve. Then I said, okay, you can stop it now. But I would go out on that stage and say, how about these new public restrooms? And the bowl would cheer. I mean, all these thousands of people. It was so funny. I'd say no one's more excited about public restroom facilities than members of the bowl audience. So anyway, and the staff and everybody at the bowl. So
and
that
the lady
was,
who doesn't have to clean the floors in her
that's
evening gown anymore.
Yes. And of course, those other restroom facilities are open too, because, you know, again, we get thousands of people here, and the lines.
I remember.
Even with Mission Gables,
lines.
we still will have a line on, you know, musical night or some nights. So anyway, having said all that, yeah, we finally, and then phase 2, the Talbert Courtyard was completed. And of course, thanks to Harriet Talbert and the generosity of others, but she was the major donor, the Talbert family, in honor of Myron Talbert, Dr. Talbert, who passed. And then phase 3, we have just finished. And I love what you said, because it's true. I believe it's one of the most outstanding examples of adaptive reuse of a house, is what it was. Now it's really a facility. It's 5,000 square feet in there, plus the restroom facilities underneath.
And just to give a perspective of the timeline, I went to the grand opening last month, or was it December?
December.
Early January. This is fresh, and you skipped. I'm bringing you back to the courtyard.
Yes.
Lori Powell did.
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
Go ahead, because I don't know what to call the thing, but it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
It's a beautiful work of art that is the Priscillas, and it's on the courtyard. And Lori and Wally are friends. You know, they've been friends with Jim and me for many years. And she's a member of the hospitality ensemble. And I knew what a fabulous artist she was. And I will brag here, I was one of the ones that suggested her. I said, Lori Powell has such a heart for the bowl. She might do this beautiful work of art.
And it's not a sculpture.
No, it's kind of a relief. Lori would probably be disappointed in me if she was here listening to me, but it is absolutely, it's a relief type of thing. It goes over our overture donor wall, we call it. These were people who started giving in the 90s. Not one of them ever asked for their money back. So we're going to do another donor wall in the future here for other people, but when people come and see, because we're just now, that's the final thing we haven't finished. She's got her beautiful artwork up there, and she spent like 2 years on it.
Yes, we interviewed her about this
Good,
piece.
I'm so glad, because she will say it exactly right.
I'm just astonished by her. I know her from art shows around town. I have some bowls, serving dishes that she made, but this is an elaborate depiction of the
bowl?
scene of the bowl, the entire landscape of it.
Yes.
And she made it so large that she had to make it in sections.
That's right.
Fire them separately.
That's right.
And cross her fingers and hope that they changed size to the same scale and fit back together, and it all worked. And it's really a miracle in my opinion.
Yeah,
this
and
thing
she
is
volunteered.
gorgeous.
This is all volunteer.
Yeah. Anyway, I've
yeah,
taken
no,
us
thank
off on
you
a
for
side
saying
track,
that, because you know, I think, and she works in many mediums, but I know pottery is one of her big things, so that lent itself well to the Bowl Project.
I'm so proud that we have this in our community, all of it. And let's talk about this summer some. And I promised to circle back. Okay. I interviewed you last week about this program, and I walked away with so much enthusiasm that you had for it, and it was contagious, and I hope I conveyed that and got the whole town fired up in my article. But the music of our lives was something you said more than once. We're going to have.
Yes, that was something I kind of started, and I'm always saying, gee, I hope it's okay, Grace Stewart Mullen. Because again, these are types of music that didn't even exist.
Let me put
back
you at
then.
ease right now. You have the vision.
Yeah.
If you
Thank
were just
you.
doing
Yeah.
what she did,
No, see, we
you would
need
have no
to-
vision and we would perish.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
go
we
on
need to
with
expand. Yes,
your
thank you.
changing from what you did.
Yes, and we are, a couple other things we are just on fire for is we are a family venue. We are we want to make sure, although it's not that we don't have microphones and amplifiers, but we sit in a neighborhood. We
Yeah.
don't sit out in the middle of nowhere. And we try very hard to keep our programs acoustic in nature, okay? And because our neighbors have loved us for 90 years and we don't want to spoil that
I
relationship.
grew up in this neighborhood.
Yeah,
I
so
think
you
it's
know.
a benefit.
Yeah, and we're very respectful of the curfews on bowl program nights and everything. So having said that, one of the things I wanted to do was kind of soundtracks of our lives. Or I think it's important that our children and the children to come know what their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, pretty soon we're going to get to great-great-grandparents. What music did they love when they were young? What really, so that's, we've done a lot into the 60s. This year, for the first time, we're going into the 70s, even with the music of John Denver, Take Me Home, Jim Curry. And of course, we have our big band concert. I kind of started that when Florence had brought Preservation Hall just before the end of her position as volunteer program director. And that was the first probably jazz program we ever had. But then I kind of went a step further with that and with, just again doing the big band shows. And I found that the first big band performance we ever had was a tribute to Harry James. And it was the Harry James Orchestra. They have these, even though, and there was one musician, because this was like 14 years ago, who was a member of the original orchestra.
Wow.
And we packed the bowl. Everybody went crazy for the big bands. And so the rest, as they say, is history. I think we've had a big band concert every year since. People expect a military band concert. They love the patriotism. They expect the Broadway musical. And I always say our season is a combination of new to the bowl stage and backed by popular demand. Because some of the programs, they just love them and they want them back,
Yeah.
And I want to make sure and mention, because of course, it was 2 years ago now, we did Music Man. And, we had the young musicians from middle schools and high schools, not all of them, but many, come up the aisles at the end with 76 trombones. And,
the students of Redlands are incorporated in more than one way. I know there's also, they do their own concerts here occasionally, there's the young artists performance, there's incorporation into the musicals.
Yes, our winners of our young artist auditions. Thanks for mentioning that, because the Bowl Associates do underwrite that, and that has been going since the 50s, the early 50s. And we have a member of our board and also Bowl Associates very involved in the competition, which will be April 20th this year over at the U of R. And I always tell people, because we have our finalists at night, and that's open to the public starting at 7. It's one of the most breathtaking things you will ever see. And we don't get a big audience for it. I wish we'd get a bigger audience. These young people are so talented, they just take your breath away.
The Young Artists Association,
yes.
or auditions.
The Young Artists auditions. The winners of the Young Artist auditions will be part of the bowl season that summer. And we usually have 6 to 8 winners. We give them nice scholarships thanks to the Associates of the Redlands Bowl. And it's a feather in their cap to win this competition.
Every year, I know the Heritage Auxiliary gives a tour of Redlands, and they stop at the bowl and they tell the story of the bowl. And it's a 4th grade program.
Yes.
My children's 4th grade teacher was, I don't even know her real name. My mother calls her Cece. Sid Breyer.
Sid Breyer, I know Sid Breyer, yes.
Yes, she's back here showing us the bowl, giving a tour of the bowl, and she says, look, my name is on there because I was a winner as a child.
The Young Artist Auditions.
And
yes,
and the thing about Redlands, you know, she was in choir with my mother in high school, and you know, her kids went to school with me, and then her grandchildren were friends with my children, and it's this whole. But yes, when you say once you've won it, that's a feather in your cap.
Oh, absolutely.
She was proud to show us that. I was proud to know somebody whose name was on there.
Oh, yes, and we've had other young people from Redlands win, and from all over the world. Because, you know, especially with Idlewild, the School of Music, we've had some European young people win. And I want to make sure and get in about all our youth music programs, because that's important. A lot of people.
That's a whole other thing.
Yes,
yeah, tell us about that.
We started with the Young Artist Auditions, and Florence started the children's music workshops on Tuesdays. And it's usually the artist that's going to appear at the bowl on Tuesday, and we do it from 3 to 3:45 in the afternoon. And of course they'll be at Mission Gables for the first time this year.
Oh.
And then I kind of started with other board members the Saturday children's music workshops in the 90s. And I think we're going to continue to have them at the community center because of the location. And we want people, families, of course it's geared for children from 4 to 10, but we want people to come and hopefully even walk. You know, the community center is within walking distance for a lot of people. Then I want to make sure and mention our Music in the Schools program, which started in 2000. Yes. And we just don't have the ability to go to every elementary school. And sometimes we've gone into the middle and high schools too, just a couple of times. But there is an overlap because Redlands Unified School District starts in August before the bowl season is finished. So we are able to take a few artists in and do assembly type performances with the youngsters.
Only as of the past 3 years.
Well, actually since 2000 was the first one we did at Franklin. We only did a couple. I think we did Franklin and Livonia that year. That was our first year, and we've expanded to other elementary schools, and we do some rotating. And then when Dallas Brass was here, they've been here twice now. They go to Clock Auditorium. They went, and they do a whole day with the youngsters, the middle school and high school kids, and then a lot of them came and performed with Dallas Brass at the end on the bowl stage, which was just terrific.
One of my favorite things ever.
Yes, and everybody's just like, oh. And I don't know, I want to, well, let me finish. Real quick story, and then I'll finish because we have 2 more children's programs. But the director of Dallas Brass came down here. They came in early the first time they came. And he was looking for me, and finally someone got me, and I came over, and I remember we were standing right here. And he's like, it was a night we did Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh.
And it was Pirates of Penzance, I think. And he was like, I've never seen anything like this in my whole life. I've never seen anything like this in my whole life. He was so taken with the Redlands Bowl Summer Music Festival. He said, this should be like this all over the United States.
Yes, it should.
You know, and it touched my heart so to see him so, and then they knew they were going to perform the following Tuesday. So anyway, back to our children's programs. In addition to, we also have other children's programs. We're expanding. Right now we go up to Burridge with the children of Micah House, and we also go to Family Service. We bring a few of our artists to Family Service, and they work with us in the summer. And we're just looking forward to doing more and more, and particularly with children from low-income families, because all of us who love the performing arts understand what a dimension it adds to our lives.
Yes.
And I think most of us can probably go back in our memory to that time when a parent or a grandparent or someone taught us that. And it's enriched our lives forever. So we are just on fire for our youth music programs.
Now I've promised 2 things, and I want to get them out real quick because I know we're getting sun and noise.
Right.
part of the Music of Our Lives series this summer is our very own Redlands grown Troy Clark doing a Frank
Yes,
Sinatra
thank you
tribute.
for bringing that up.
And I'm so excited about that, and I got to get it out there. I
Yes.
also wanted to mention, you talked about the Music Man. The Redlands Bowl has had 3 Music Man productions.
That's
I was
true.
in one of them.
Oh.
Eric Grunler, who until yesterday was the president
Yes.
of RCMA, was in all 3, a distinction that I think should go down on our
Yeah,
recording.
yeah.
And I promised to circle back to the grant that Bev got.
Oh.
We're getting 2
Asian programs. Again, World Music and Dance has been part of the bowl forever. We have Lily Kai, Chinese dance company, coming in July. And we have Taiko Project coming in August.
backed by popular demand.
Backed by popular demand, although Taiko Project has not been at the bowl before. We had San Jose Taiko, but people, yes, I've said, people would ask me, stop me in the grocery store, stop me in the parking lot. When are we having Taiko drumming again? You know, everybody just loves it. And so Taiko Project, they've been at Cerritos, they've been at Court Amphitheater, and it's just,
And
they're
coming
both
on
going
my
to be
birthday, so
fabulous.
I'm
Oh,
loving
good.
that.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah,
we're getting
we're
a
kind of-
tour.
Yes, isn't that great? Some of the
4th grade
school
tour
kids.
that I just mentioned.
Oh,
I think.
how
no,
appropriate.
those are not 4th
Oh,
graders.
no, they look a little younger, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is there anything that I have forgotten to ask and really need to pull it?
Gee,
We didn't get stories
I,
from the Gebara era.
Oh, well, it's just developing now. I will say my darling Jim supported me from the very beginning when I first joined Bowl Associates. He and I, used to have tables for the bowl benefits, and he's just been a wonderful part of the bowl, and I'm just proud to continue to serve in my capacity. It is an absolute labor of love. It is a calling, I feel, and yeah, so I always say God's in charge of the bowl, but right now I'm helping.
I wish we had
So-
another hour. I
thank
think
you.
there's so much
Yeah,
more to
it's
talk
wonderful.
about. But I
Oh.
thank you so much for coming out today and
Thank
sitting
you,
with us and
Tony.
what has
Thank
become the
you.
direct sunlight.
Yes,
So.
yeah.